You know, when people talk about building a house, everyone just completely obsesses over the highly visible stuff.
Oh, for sure. The paint colors, the kitchen counters.
Right, the marble countertops, the brass slate fixtures, but literally nobody ever walks into a house and says, wow, check out the structural integrity of this foundation.
Yeah, because a good foundation is just completely invisible.
Hmm?
I mean, the only time you ever actually notice it is if it's cracked.
Oh, exactly.
And then suddenly it's the only thing you can focus on because the entire house starts to tilt.
And when you step into the world of event planning, specifically, wedding planning, the actual wedding day is the paint and the countertops.
Yeah, the highly visible stuff.
Right. The dress, the flowers, the massive reception. But that Friday night before, the rehearsal dinner, that is the foundation. If you get the mechanics of that night wrong, the entire weekend starts to tilt before the main event even begins. So welcome to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, our mission is to really demystify this critical, but honestly often overlooked event. We're extracting the crucial nuggets of event coordination so that you, whether you're planning your own weekend, stepping up as a best man, or just, fascinated by how complex events function, can understand how to set the perfect tone without completely burning your budget.
Yeah, and to do that, we're looking at this through a highly analytical lens today. We're pulling from comprehensive logistical frameworks, specifically the kind of high-level strategic guidance you'd find if you really dig into the business sections and the niche logistics articles on platforms like the Weddizer website.
The Weddizer site has some amazing resources for this.
They really do. And what's fascinating about this approach is that it strips away the whole fairy tale aesthetic. It treats the rehearsal dinner not as a party, but as a precise logistical operation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even think about booking a restaurant or, doing food tastings, we have to look at the why and the who. Because if you don't understand the functional purpose of an operation, you really can't properly execute it. And looking at these Weddizer logistics articles, it becomes immediately clear that this dinner has 3 very specific functional jobs to do.
Yeah, and job number 1 is purely mechanical. It clarifies roles for the ceremony.
Okay.
Like you've just finished the physical walkthrough of the wedding venue. The dinner is the debrief.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's where you solidify the staging, who is walking with who, where they stand, and the exact timing cues for the next 24 hours.
It's basically the final tactical briefing before deployment.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And then job number 2 is psychological, because the wedding day itself is this high-pressure, heavily scheduled environment where the hosts are essentially on stage.
Yeah, totally on stage.
Right, so the rehearsal dinner is engineered to act as a pressure release valve. It is meant to provide a stress-free environment where the key players can actually just breathe.
Which is so rare on a wedding weekend.
Exactly. And that leads to job number 3, which is arguably the most important for the long-term success of the whole weekend. It forces friends and family to bond.
Okay, yeah.
It serves as the primary social icebreaker for the 2 sides of the aisle.
Which brings up a massive point of friction, honestly, because if the primary goal of this dinner is to act as a psychological pressure release valve, that immediately begs a critical question.
Who actually gets to be in the room?
Exactly, because if you invite the wrong mix of people, you don't relieve pressure, you just multiply it.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, I'm looking at the traditional guest list from our sources, and it's basically like casting a stage play. You have your lead actors, the couple and their parents.
Right.
You have your supporting cast, the bridesmaids and groomsmen, and you have the director, the officiant, plus their partner. That is a really tight, manageable ensemble.
It is.
But then the source material introduces the absolute wild card, which is out-of-town guest.
Yeah, that category is the single largest variable in your entire planning equation.
Yeah.
It is where the logistical wheels usually just start to wobble.
Which forces a pretty brutal conversation about priorities. If you invite every single person who flew in from out of town, suddenly your intimate dinner of 20 turns into a mini reception of 80 people.
And that changes everything.
Right. So is this where the foundation cracks? Like, do couples make their first major strategic error by treating Friday night like wedding part 1?
They absolutely do. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it comes down to a failure to understand the underlying math. The guest list dictates literally every single financial and logistical decision moving forward.
Wow, every decision.
Yeah. The business frameworks we're analyzing emphasize that managing budget expectations right here at the headcount phase is the key to the entire operation. It is a strict seesaw.
Okay, a seesaw how?
Well, if you keep the list intimate, just the essential cast members you mentioned, you can reallocate your per-head budget. That allows you to secure a premium venue and serve incredible high-tier food.
Ah, so you get the dry-aged steak instead of the buffet-line pasta.
Exactly. But modern planning is highly flexible. If your primary objective is inclusivity,
Yeah.
and you really want to honor the people who traveled, you can certainly expand that list.
Sure, that's totally understandable.
It is. However, the system demands a trade-off. Expanding the list means you must actively downgrade your expectations for the venue and the menu to stay within budget.
Right, because the money has to come from somewhere.
Exactly. You cannot have a massive, inclusive guest list and a hyper-premium experience without just blowing the budget completely out of the water. You have to decide your core priority, intimacy, or inclusivity, and let that govern the math.
So assuming you've done the math, the head count is locked, the budget per person is established. The immediate next step in the operation is geographic, right? We are moving to the where and a when.
Yes.
And looking at the Weddizer logistics articles, venue selection isn't just about what looks aesthetically pleasing on Instagram, it's a multivariable equation.
It really is.
The criteria they list are proximity to the rehearsal site, guest capacity, thematic alignment, and catering flexibility.
And out of all of those, proximity is paramount. It all comes down to the mechanics of momentum. The timeline here is exceptionally tight.
How tight are we talking?
Well, you have a ceremony rehearsal that takes roughly 30 to 60 minutes. After that, you have a 2 to 3 hour dinner involving speeches and mingling. The dinner must start shortly after the rehearsal to maintain the energy.
Let's explore the mechanism of that momentum loss, because I really think people underestimate the friction of moving a group of humans from point A to point B.
Oh, it is a massive vulnerability in the schedule. Imagine 50 guests wrapping up a rehearsal at 5:30 p.m. If your dinner venue is a 25-minute drive across town, you aren't just losing 25 minutes.
You're losing way more.
Exactly. You're dealing with people trying to secure ride shares in an unfamiliar city during rush hour. You were dealing with staggered arrivals.
Ugh, that sounds awful.
It is. By the time the last group walks in, your early arrivals have been sitting around for 45 minutes. The kitchen's dinner service schedule is permanently derailed. And that stress-free environment we established as a primary goal has completely evaporated.
It's literally a cascading logistical failure caused by just a few miles of geography.
Yep.
So you lock in a venue close by. You're looking at restaurants, private estates, rooftops, which brings up the environmental variable, the great indoor versus outdoor debate.
Ah, yes.
The guidance notes that outdoor venues offer undeniable scenic beauty, but they demand a weather contingency plan. Indoor venues provide climate consistency. Now, I have to challenge the romance of the outdoor garden party here.
Go for it.
So what does this all mean for the planner's stress levels? Is the Instagram aesthetic of a sunset dinner really worth the anxiety of a weather backup plan? Or should planners prioritize the safety of an indoor venue and completely eliminate that variable?
That's a highly logical stance. But the stress you're describing comes from the illusion of control. You can't control the weather. But what the top-tier logistical frameworks point out is that you don't need to control the environment if you control the information.
Okay, wait, explain that.
The real secret to managing arrival, flow, and sudden environmental changes isn't renting a massive tent. It is airtight communication protocols.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If you establish clear communication with your guests, giving them precise directions, firm start times, and explicitly stating the backup protocol ahead of time, an outdoor venue is perfectly viable.
It's almost like military comms.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
If it rains, you aren't scrambling to individually text 50 confused people that the dinner has moved inside. They already know the protocol. The pivot is pre-communicated, understood, and executed without panic.
Wow, that drastically changes the equation. And the anxiety isn't really about the rain at all. The anxiety is about the confusion caused by the rain. If you eliminate the confusion, you eliminate the stress. Okay, so we've navigated the geography, the communication is solid, and the guests have successfully arrived at the venue on time. Now we transition from getting them there to managing their actual experience inside the room.
The fun part.
Right. This involves what they eat and, crucially, who they talk to.
So the menu is obviously the centerpiece. And whether you opt for a formal plated dinner or just heavy appetizers or a casual backyard BBQ, the most critical logistical hurdle is not the cuisine type.
What is it then?
It is the meticulous accounting of dietary restrictions.
Right.
The Weddizer niche articles explicitly highlight managing vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, and allergy-specific options.
Which is huge, but honestly, I think a lot of people still view this as a polite courtesy rather than a mandatory operational requirement.
And viewing it as a courtesy is a trap. This is a foundational hospitality metric.
A foundational metric.
Yeah, remember the core function of the evening, creating a warm, stress-free environment. Think about the psychology of a guest who has traveled hundreds of miles, arrives at a dinner, and realizes there is absolutely nothing they can safely eat.
That is just awful.
It is. Nothing creates alienation and quiet resentment faster than physical hunger combined with feeling overlooked. Ensuring every single person in that room is proactively accommodated is how you engineer comfort.
Engineering comfort. I love that phrasing. And that is a perfect segue into the seating arrangements, which is honestly where things get truly fascinating.
Yes.
The source material points out that open seating works for very small groups, but assigned seating is a strict requirement for larger gatherings to avoid that awkward middle school cafeteria dynamic.
Nobody wants that.
No. But it goes a step further and explicitly suggests intentionally mixing family and friends from both sides to create an inclusive atmosphere. Now, I have a question about this. Is mixing the two families together like a forced corporate team-building exercise? Or is it actually the secret ingredient to making the wedding day itself run more smoothly? Because assigned seating at a rehearsal dinner feels so rigid to me.
Well, what's fascinating here is that your preference for open seating is actually a recipe for massive social siloing. What we are talking about is social engineering.
Okay, social engineering.
Yeah, if you leave 50 people to their own devices in a room, human nature dictates they will gravitate toward the familiar. The bride's family will barricade themselves at one table. The groom's college friends will huddle at the bar.
So everyone just stays in their own safe little bubbles.
Exactly, and if they stay in their bubbles on Friday night, they will stay in their bubbles on Saturday night. By assigning seats and intentionally mixing the groups, you are forcing interaction, but you are doing it in a low-stakes environment with food and drinks, acting as a social buffer.
But how do you actually execute that without it being incredibly awkward? You can't just like throw names in a hat, right?
Oh, definitely not. It requires tactical placement. You don't seat the chaotic groomsman next to the ultra-conservative great aunt.
Good point.
You use anchors. You take the highly extroverted, charming cousin from one side of the family and seat them with the quieter, more reserved friends from the other side. You're essentially establishing a joint command structure for the weekend.
Is brilliant.
It really works. When these same people walk into the massive wedding reception the next day, they aren't strangers anymore. They already shared a laugh over dinner. They have an inside joke. It fundamentally changes the energy of the main event from a room full of strangers into a cohesive, integrated group.
Wow, so you aren't just assigning chairs. You are preemptively striking against social awkwardness for the main event.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have the people, the place, the food, and the social engineering is executing perfectly. Now we must look at the final systems that hold this whole operation together and the common traps that ruin the event.
Right. The business-focused articles really emphasize locking down the fine details to prevent last-minute friction. Transportation is a major one. If your venue requires any sort of complex navigation, arranging dedicated shuttles is non-negotiable.
Because asking an out-of-town guest to navigate a dark, unfamiliar city after a few glasses of wine is just a huge logistical liability.
It is. Then you have the physical environment, the decor. The strategic advice is to keep it simple but elegant. You use localized touches, perhaps some simple florals or candles, but you deliberately ensure it does not compete with the visual impact of the wedding day itself.
You don't want to upstage the actual wedding.
Exactly. But the most volatile element of the evening's programming is definitely the speeches.
Oh man, the dreaded open mic night.
It is a massive risk. The guidance recommends a loose but firmly controlled schedule. You want to allow key individuals, the parents, the couple themselves, to share meaningful words. But it requires a containment strategy.
Containment strategy, yeah.
If you don't put parameters on the speeches, a 15-minute toast session turns into an hour-long endurance test for your guests.
So true. So how do we get these people into this carefully engineered environment in the first place? Let's talk about the logistics of the invitation.
Yes.
The source material highlights digital invites as increasingly popular and cost-effective, but they must clearly state the date, time, venue, dress code, and highly specific RSVP instructions to avoid last-minute confusion.
Which brings us to the system thinking behind those invites.
Yeah.
It's not just about saving money on postage. A digital invite provides a frictionless user interface.